Hi, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre The Beast Crayton Show. Today, we're going to go into the mindset of a lifestyle coach. I know where you're going, Dre. Everybody's a lifestyle coach. May be true to some degree, but exactly what is a lifestyle coach and what part of their life are they really coaching to other individuals? And I've heard many stories as it pertains to that topic of a lifestyle coach. But today is one that's even more impactful because this individual's journey started in childhood, and she was able to recognize this, and it's surprising at a young age decided to do something about it. I'm going to let her share her story all the way from across the pond, UK, London. Welcome to the show, Annalie Howling, to the show. How you doing?
Thank you so much. Really, really well. Thank you.
Beautiful name, by the way. Howling to the moon. I like that. We shared a little bit off camera, your story, and it was so impactful that it could have went 50 different ways, but we got 30 minutes to basically take the individuals into what it was like for you and how you became a lifestyle coach with your story. Let's start back in with your childhood. You grew up in the UK. Tell the viewers a little bit about you before we get into your journey.
Sure. So, grew up in the UK, sort of what would appear to be a fairly, I suppose, standard 2.4 children is a British term that we often use for kind of a standard family, in a fairly middle class kind of upbringing. But unfortunately for me, it was an unsafe environment. There was violence in the household. My father was very violent towards me, and my mother was his partner in collusion, and they had a very codependent relationship that meant that I was always very much on the outside of that and reminded very often that it was it was not a safe, enjoyable place to be. So school became a very safe place for me, and places that I could sort of find early other sources, information, to sort of different examples even, or models of how a life could be for me.
When you mention codependent parents, what does that translate into?
Yeah, from a child's perspective, from my own childhood, it's just somewhere that's impermeable. So, you are not the center of your parents' sort of world. And we could have various discussions about that, sort of good different parenting models. I'm a mother, do things differently. But from my perspective, given that there was violence and it was unsafe, there was no parent that I could go to or caregiver to say, hey, I don't think this is right, or I'm hurt physically, or there's a lot of mental bullying as well, an awful lot of mental abuse as well. So yeah, you're constantly unsafe. You're not heard. There's no sort of platform for you, and there's this nucleus, if you like, of their relationship that you will be on the outside of, kind of forevermore. That's the nature of codependency.
You have other siblings, correct?
Yes.
Were they impacted as well?
Not in the same way. Not in the same way.
Like what kind of ways? What was the difference between what your siblings were encountering versus yourself?
So siblings younger, and I think potentially there was an element of me being sort of the first one there. And I think also, honestly, I think I've always had a bit of fire in me, which is a good thing. And so when there is a point that something isn't right, as much as maybe there wasn't things I could do about it, like you can't get your basic needs met. This is also way before the internet and stuff like that. I didn't know any avenues to kind of ask for help or those sorts of things in those times. So there would be times I would use my voice. And so I think that I understood the repercussions that came with that.
Oh, you was boisterous because that's the only way you knew how to be. But it didn't resonate good with the parents. When you said something earlier, you said the safe haven was going to school. How old were you? How old were you when you really start to recognize that it was something totally wrong in your household?
It's a really good question. I think do you know, really early, actually, I can remember I used to sort of say to myself in my head, like I'd spend a lot of time on my own. Obviously, I'd be in, my bedroom or somewhere just trying to stay out the way, stay out of trouble. And I can remember, this sounds rude, I don't mean it to be in this way, but I remember thinking, I cannot belong to these people. I used to go looking for my birth certificate. I don't know how it works exactly in the States, but I was looking for my birth certificate because I was convinced that they could not be my real parents, like absolutely convinced that I would somehow find my birth certificate and they'd be like, oh yeah, there was a mix up, you're right, you don't belong to these people or here. And that was how I felt. I just always felt that this was not where I was supposed to be. It was a very, very strong feeling from a very young age.
You went to school for safety. Did you confide in anybody at the school? Did any of your classmates see what you was going to do? Were there physical altercations with you, or was it just verbal, or was it a combination?
Yeah, very physical, very physical. There was an incident I've spoken about before quite publicly where my father punched me in the face in a restaurant. My nose just went blood everywhere. And I was the same age as my daughter is now, I was about 7 years old. And there were people in a restaurant.
Whoa, whoa. Your father punched you in a restaurant and nobody, the British police didn't say nothing or arrest him?
I remember that it was on a holiday in Spain. My mother hadn't come out for dinner that night. She's also a hypochondriac. Like, add that to the list. And it's one of those things. I don't, trauma is a funny thing, and I can talk to that as well. I can remember certain parts. I remember looking around the restaurant afterwards because I was so shocked, and people kind of giving advice as to, use ice or whatever it might be. I don't know if anybody saw the altercation itself. I don't know if, this is like 36 years ago. I'm not saying that it definitely wasn't okay. I don't know who saw what, but that was an incident along with others. And yes, it was very violent, very physical.
And your mom would allow this to take place?
This might sound strange. This is, to me, I've obviously done a lot of work on this. The collusion was one of the worst betrayals. And since becoming a mother myself, that's the part that I found the hardest to maybe make peace with, because to me, my daughter is, I'm a lioness, she's my cub. Like, you come for her, you know that you're going to come through me. There's just, that's in me. It's in my nature. And that particular day at the restaurant, there's obviously blood all over my clothes, and we get back to this apartment at this holiday place in Spain. And I remember, and again, I've spoken about this before, I remember my mother looking to my father a bit like, oh, like, you've gone a bit far this time. And they kind of looked to each other really awkwardly. And I'm pretty sure that about this age, boys within my school, I know it can be common in boys in adolescence, like nosebleeds can be a part of the adolescence process, like voices dropping and changing.
Right.
And I think I'd been talking about it at school. I must have said, oh, so-and-so, this happened today or whatever. And they looked to each other. And then my mother went, well, you did say you'd never had a nosebleed before. A little bit like, well, you did say you wanted a puppy for Christmas. Well, you did say. And I can remember then thinking, oh my God, like this is, I knew it wasn't right, but this is the thing with shame and trauma, is there's part of you that kind of goes, oh, I must be so bad. I must be so bad for you to do this to me. I must have spoken out of turn. I must have said the
right thing. Their actions, even though in the right state of mind, you knew the shit was fucked up.
Right.
When did
but
you?
Also 7, I'm in Spain. It's 37 years ago. What the hell am I going to do? There's no mobiles, there's no phone, there's no internet. I can't meet any of my basic needs. Like, what happens is your aggressors are also your protectors. It's a really, to your point, fucked up situation. And so this whole inner sense of, mean, that was to me, one of the worst times. It haunted me for a really long time that. And, that was a proper flashback. That was a trauma that I saw so often. And yeah, it takes you, but there was this inner sense from before then, but definitely then, this is not right. And this life, these people, this is not where I'm going to end up.
Where's your other family? Where's your uncles, your grandmother, the relatives? I mean, this
Yeah.
was it just contained in the household and they act, well, hell, they had to act the same in public because he punched you in the fucking
Yeah.
face.
I mean, honestly, I'm actually not entirely sure. We didn't have sort of family that lived really close by.
Right.
So again, you'd see someone maybe a couple of times a year and they were lovely. My grandmother, however, so all other grandparents had passed before I arrived on my father's side. So we only had my maternal grandmother, and she was, and I believe still is, lost her, in fact, nearly 8 years ago. And I miss her every day. She was just the most wonderful, wonderful woman, my entire inspiration, showed me what was possible in life. And my happiest memories of childhood were going to her house and having weekends there. So it's a funny question you ask. I wonder if maybe, thinking about it as an adult, which I have a lot, I wonder if maybe she knew, and her way of trying to protect me was, trying to have as much time as possible where possible. And she was an incredible woman.
How do you maneuver? What age or what moment of your life do you realize I've had enough? Because I can just imagine probably everything was going through your mind. A lot of times when this happens, I'm not a therapist, but I would suppose that if you now are adopting the belief that there's something wrong with you, that you're causing this, I'm surprised you didn't result into cutting or trying to kill yourself, promiscuous partners, and just to validate, I guess, or to get this confusion out. Did any of this stuff ever happen to you?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, I say, of course. I mean, so absolutely. You grew up with, I mean, what happens with trauma is that you end up, you take on shame, and shame is an I am. So, those incidences, I'm a child, these are my caregivers. I'm being told as well, I made him do it. I was so naughty, I am so bad. So you're being told, this is your sort of narrative that you're being offered as well from someone that was put on this earth to love you. So I must be so awful and I must be so bad if my own parents think this of me. So yes, absolutely. I did have that as part of a lens. I think thankfully for me, most of it manifested in a get me the fuck out of here, and I will never, ever, as soon as I can get myself out, I will never go back, ever. And I haven't. I left that house at 21. I've never set back a foot in it, never once. Like that was as soon as I could, and as soon as I could do it properly, that was it. And I was so dedicated to making sure that I could be, so we have other stories here, but like making myself financially secure. So yeah, I mean, where did I make sacrifices or damage myself? Trying to the way I kind of killed myself was doing anything and everything to be able to get myself out of there and so much farther away from that. So work, sure, probably some poor choices in relationships, because you think you're this bad, broken person. So you're not thinking, oh, I'm absolutely tremendous and I'm going to choose from a really high benchmark of self-worth, especially not when I was much younger. That
Right.
was honestly, I was sprinting a marathon to get me the fuck away from them. And that to me was like, work and work and work to then get, security, which I saw at that time as financial, because then I could, to me, make myself safe. So that's what I was doing. I was absolutely trying to outrun that trauma.
I'm surprised that nobody did you live in such a, let me rephrase this. Did you wear the mask so good that nobody knew about it? Because you never indicated that you shared with anybody. So did you wear a mask like the Joker that smiled everywhere you went and nobody probably even knew that you had these situations going on in your home because of your environment, where you live, middle class, you know, some things are meant to stay in the closet. Did you wear the smile every day and people didn't know?
I think So I'm sort of answering this in a long way. I think social media can be incredibly helpful in some ways and harmful in others. And when I was sort of, should we say, coming through that and growing up and beginning to have conversations about this, the response was collectively, but they're your family. You only get one, mum and dad. That's you only, blood is thicker than water. That's what it is, blanket. So you learn very quickly not to say anything. And then what you also learn is that you should be even more ashamed because there's evidently something really wrong with you. No one is either interested or there is no help, and you should also be grateful. And so you start thinking, wow, I really am fucked up here, or like it must be my fault. And you're right. So this is where I think for me, certainly, social media it's American Mother's Day today. England, we have a different Mother's Day in March. It's US Mother's Day today and Global Mother's Day today that we're speaking on. And one of the great things I think that has happened is you often get on newsletters you might be subscribed to in about a month in advance. They'll say, if you prefer to opt out of sort of notifications about our Mother's Day products, click here. I love things like that, so, and there were a lot of, again, social media and connecting with people like yourself and having big honest conversations. Suddenly there was no model for me to look at and go, oh, that has happened to that person and they were okay. Like that didn't exist, so that's where I think that why did I did speak to a few people, and I got those stock responses. And so that tells you very quickly not to talk about it, and that really this is your problem and you should somehow be grateful and all the rest of it. And then more latterly, as I've sort of been doing different work around myself and honestly having my daughter, that really changed everything for me, because you just
how did let's go back a little bit. Okay, so you leave the house. Let me put it your words. You got the fuck up out of there as quick as you could. You get up out of the house. Did you have a plan?
Oh, it was always so at that point, I'd done an MBA, I'd started my MBA, I've, got a good job. I'm in a good job program as well. I've gone to London, shiny London, where all the promises of the world, all those kind of things. So my plan was make money and make money fast, because then you can buy. I'm still kind of that age group where it was security is in bricks and mortar. So it was very much that you buy a home, you get your mortgage, you pay it off, and then you're safe. And we chatted a little bit off air, and I think I said to you, there was no backup plan for me. It wasn't like I could try out a career in this area or that area, and if it didn't work, not to worry, you can go back to your parents and maybe eat a bit of humble pie, but there's always that bedroom for you there, and meals on the table and everything else. Like that was not available for me. So the make it work plan, cash.
Did okay, so you get the cash, but how do you nurture a relationship with another partner? Because I didn't hear any of that through this journey. Did whether or not you had a boyfriend, but now are relationship wise, but now that you're out, how was it? How difficult was it for you to form a relationship, an adult relationship with a male?
So incredibly easy, but at the same time, never fully vulnerable. So what I now understand that I did in work, potentially in some friendships, definitely in romantic relationship, I kept people very cleverly just at arm's length. So because then you can't really hurt me. So finding relationship, connecting to, and honestly, nice people, like thankfully that I didn't repeat patterns of, sort of terrible relationships, but I certainly did not date people that I probably saw as like maybe an equal in that way. And I definitely locked part of myself away from them, because I just, and then in doing so, you're performing, to a degree, you're performing a bit of an act. You're maybe being a bit of a chameleon, and not intending to be Machiavelli in any way, but just because you want to be well received. And I've been told also by being myself, I'm awful. So, so awful and so bad that you kind of want to put your best foot forward. present a certain part of yourself. So the answer is very, very easy to be in relationship. Did I show up? Did I actually, was I, at what point have I felt able to receive unconditional love and really show up as myself? Very recently. Like that's taken a long time.
What were the turning points when you get out the house? Because you still have to address the woman in the mirror. These things still take place that haven't been addressed. When do you take accountability to realize that you're not the problem, that you got caught up in a situation? Social media was not kind to you. When did the lights change? When did you take accountability for your own mental awareness?
I would say it began really when I had my big burnout. So I was 29 at the time, and because I had all the stuff that I was told would make me happy. So I had the Range Rover, the new Range Rover, I had the house and the right postcode, on the right road. I had the right boyfriend / fiance at that time, and everything was fantastic. And I felt like absolute shit, and I was ill and didn't know why. And you're still getting promotions and your reputation's fantastic and all these sorts of things. You got the trips, and I literally was living the Sex and the City lifestyle that I thought was what would make me happy and what I wanted and all the rest of it. And I was getting ill, and I didn't know why. I was having these intolerance tests at one point, and the reality was I was intolerant to my life because I was just trying to make something work that was not in alignment with who I actually am. So I ended up having a coaching session with one of my really good friends, and it was all a bit woo-woo and weird at that time. It's quite a long time ago now, and it wasn't sort of mainstream. Like Wendy Rhodes hadn't been cracking her whip and doing her thing and making it all sexy and cool. And anyway, but it was so transformative to me. She did a guided visualization, and it just connected clearly to my subconscious, but it connected to a part of me that I don't think, honestly, I've been able to reach or I was prepared to go near. And it just unlocked something in me. And I am a type A. And I was like, right, I need to go and find out everything there is to know about this coaching thing. So took myself off to San Fran. I was West Coast for ages, undertook all of the qualifications, all the add-ons, like Miss Thing, get all the best certifications done. But in the process of learning, what they don't tell you in like coach school, holy shit, you're going to show up and they are going to sort of break you apart. Like, you're going to learn how to be vulnerable. And honestly, that's probably the first time in a room full of kind of strangers that became friends that I really was myself, and I allowed myself to not perform, not have an armor on me, just actually say how I really was feeling or what was going on. So it took me that long to start. And then ever since then, I'm sort of looking at some flowers behind me now. It's kind of been like, that's been the process. But the biggest piece of work for me has been learning how to become vulnerable. And honestly, it's a bit like, I'm not trying to belittle anyone in recovery by saying this flippantly. It's not flippant. But I have to remind myself to try and stay open. It's much more easy for me to close. So that's my work that I still do.
What was the 3 things that you was holding on so much that it was causing you to be ill? Because you capitalized on something, being vulnerable, and because you was unvulnerable, there had to be, in your case, tons of things. But what were the 3 major components that once you did unlock it, everything else became pretty much easy?
So one of the big things was sort of, I guess, starting a bit of a spiritual journey, like developing a bit of a belief system somewhere. Like, I hadn't really explored anything like that. And I remember reading a book on a period of gardening leave in between 2 jobs, and it transformed everything for me. It was suddenly a gateway into something I hadn't really learned about, and just sort of gave me a pathway to thinking differently. So that sort of really taught me about, when I talk about non-attachment, that was something that really helped me manage my mind. So that's sort of where I look at spirituality for me, is it really helped me understand my own mind. The other thing was understanding why I hadn't been able to be vulnerable, and that didn't need to be another thing on my shame list of like things to feel terrible about myself. And like I say, sort of leaning into, honestly, it sounds like people will be listening, and there are times that we are very good at just doing chit chat. Yeah. How are you? And so I don't like lying. I don't enjoy lying. I think it's just a bad thing to do for your own system, keeping toxicity in your system. But I was very good at never saying what was really happening, at keeping other people talking. So I'd be with someone right now, we could be chatting and I'd be saying nothing. Like, as in, we'd be talking, you think we're having a great chat. And I'm like, I didn't have to tell him how I felt. I didn't have to tell Andre what was really going on with me. Like, oh, got away with it. And so for me, one of the biggest pieces to unlock from that was saying something that was really happening for me and realizing that you wouldn't feel burdened. Like, I'm not a nuisance. You didn't think less of me. I didn't have to appear perfect. That was huge. And I would say the last one, there's something in here about just permission to really be myself. And myself is lots of different pieces. Like, I'm no one thing. Like, I need a lot of different stuff to make me me. And again, I think I felt I'd always been wrong for that.
What are three things that make you me? You say you got a lot of different things that make you
Oh,
me.
yeah.
You're a lot of university. You're a lot of universe here. What are the three things that make you you right now that has been unlocked?
So I'm a very, very sexually motivated woman. I'm a very sexual woman. My sexuality, my sensuality is incredibly important to me. That's something that I think I had probably felt a bit ashamed of, or not even really understood, to be honest. I think that I hadn't understood my own needs, and then that would be possible to communicate and have them met, and that also it was okay for someone to kind of own and wear their sexuality quite overtly. I really hadn't understood that. It's a very important component for me in romantic relationship, not like freely for me, no judgment, but that is something that's hugely important for me. That's like a non-negotiable, and it's a big part of sort of my, like I say, essence as a woman. That's something important to me. The other is I can like geek out, massively geek out on all the leadership stuff. I've got a huge library in there, so I'll seem like a paradox at times. I'll be like geeking out on sort of all the leadership, all the performance work, all of the beast mode things that we can really get out of ourselves. Like, oh, you'll see me like fine-tuning supplements, training, all these sorts of things. So I kind of flip between like geek professor mode and this like sexual being. And then the other thing about me is I realized that I like to keep my circle of really close people quite small, because I enjoy being, again, now I've sort of learned this, being fully myself without filtering, without worrying, without feeling the need to perform. And before that, I think, again, possibly feeling the need to like be a bit of a chameleon, be nice to everybody, I probably had a bigger circle than was healthy. And actually, it's quite again, it felt quite courageous thing to do, to just be really clear with my boundaries around who is in that, and whoever's in that, it's like, everything's available. Like, I just want to be fully myself, and outside of that, it's quite private, and that's okay.
Before we wrap up, let me send a beautiful thank you for coming on the show and sharing such a impactful story. But I'm gonna have a few more questions before we wrap up. Have you forgiven your parents, and have you sat down and talked with them about what? Because I would think that would be part of the healing process, to get it off your chest and not really be concerned about their reaction, because their reaction may be the same if they realize that they haven't done anything to begin with. But have you sat down and really talked with them? Was that part of your treatment plan? And if you did, what was the reaction?
So no to a conversation. However, yes, I have forgiven them both a long time ago. So it's one of those things that for me, I didn't want to carry that. I also, if faced with, because sometimes in life, other people are not great. And so the way that I try and think is that person's soul is going to be in real conflict. Like, people's souls aren't meant to behave in that way. Like, that's not what we're here for. Like, I'm in service of others, you're doing something in service of others. So I try and send compassion to their souls, but in this realm, it's not healthy for me. So no to a conversation, absolutely yes to forgiveness.
People were kind of rude to you on the social media aspect by saying, well, that's your family. You only got one family, but they didn't walk in your shoes. What would you tell somebody if somebody came with the same scenario that you just had on social media? How would you address it? Because the way they addressed it with you was definitely not putting their being put in your space. So how would you redirect that if somebody came to you with that same scenario?
I would tell them just not to be afraid of their path, and to, you know, look at, like I say, I had this huge sense that that just wasn't where I was meant to be. And I was right, you know, like, I'm not saying I'm delighted, oh, good for me, I'm right. But if somebody has this sense that something isn't right, lean into that. Speak to a friend, speak to someone. This is where social media can be quite good. You can be quite anonymous. There are chat groups, there are chat rooms, and you will find people now that can also connect with you and you feel less alone. I think for me, shame really thrives when you feel like you're the only one. So find communities, places and spaces where, even if, like I say, you're doing it anonymously to start with, just sharing some of your truth, and you will find places where people will just really witness you and be there with you. And sometimes that's all we need. Don't need necessarily a pat on the head or anything else. Sometimes it's just simply to be witnessed and not judged.
What are you doing now? And such a beautiful story. I like the fact that you overcame it all. You have a beautiful daughter. You're a mother now. Two-part questions before that. Let's go to, how is it being a mother now? What are you bringing into your daughter's space after all the trauma that you went into? What's going to make you a better mother?
I hope the awareness of shame. I try and make sure that at no point does she take on shame. So at some points, she does stuff that, you know, usually I always say to her, look, mummy don't even usually raising her voice if you're doing something you might get hurt. Let's go for like running round the pool, you know, like parents, you're like, please no, like, you know, like running around a wet pool and you're like, oh. And I, you know, I say to her, and or maybe there's something that we do actually need to just talk about. And I make sure I say to her straight away and first, listen, there is never a second, never 1 second that I don't love you so much. But I didn't like X, that you did because da, da, da. So I make it separate to her. She is not naughty. I didn't enjoy that thing that you did, or I felt it was unsafe. Like, I try and make sure that she is separate to the event so that it's not hers to take on. And I also apologize a lot. You know, I'm tired. I work late. I'm not perfect. I'm not, you know, we have good boundaries. We have a great relationship, but sometimes I'm wrong, and that's okay.
So what's your end game now? What are you doing now? You're doing a lot of stuff on your plate. You're making moves. You're doing a lot of different things. I don't want to give all the information, so you can tell the
Sure.
viewers, what are you doing now?
Sure. Well, yeah, watch this space. It's actually like a huge thing happening in the next 2 weeks, which is very, very focused on the US. So you'll be seeing a lot more of me, I hope, from
Okay.
particularly sort of early next year. I'm actually in Dallas, Miami, and New York in the fall. Going to be doing some events and some filming and creating some more cinematic film. We're actually going to be doing some filming with a really good friend of mine who I did some work with, and we're going to be using my daughter in some of the films as my own inner child, kind of try and communicate where we maybe take on shame and things like that. So trying to communicate some of the ways people may feel, to sort of loop this back serendipitously if perhaps you haven't got the words sometimes, and just trying to again help normalize if someone is feeling a certain way, and try and communicate that creatively.
How can the viewers reach out to you to know everything that you got going on, guest
Thank,
appearances and so forth?
thank you. Yeah, so at Annalie Howling on Instagram is the probably the biggest platform. I have a YouTube, nothing like yours, but there's a few free videos on there. There's some nice ones explaining trauma and shame. There's a couple of free masterclasses about managing negative self-talk. I wanted to put it out there for free for people that are struggling, because it's a privilege to work with me and I'm aware of that. So I want to make sure there are some free resources. So that's Annalie Howling on YouTube and my website, annaliehowling.com.
You know what? I appreciate you taking time to come on to the show. Like I said, once again, such a beautiful story. Remember, individuals that are watching this show, this is a judge-free zone. Put yourself in somebody's shoes before you start to make comments that are unhealthy. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Crayton show.